Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Elizabeth Dent. I'm a senior fellow here at the Washington Institute. Welcome to today's policy forum, the U.S. and Bahrain ties 1 year after the Strategic Partnership Agreement. September 13th will mark the first anniversary of the signing of the Comprehensive Security Integration and Prosperity Agreement between the United States and Bahrain, which was signed to strengthen bilateral strategic cooperation across defense, economic, and technology sectors, essentially redefining security by expanding beyond the traditional scope of defense and military cooperation. The United States continues to confront the region's most difficult challenges, from escalating Iranian aggression to the war in Gaza, as well as confronting terrorism, upholding the rules-based international order and the freedom of navigation, and even competition with China and questions about the durability of American commitment in the Middle East. All the while, Middle East partners continue to seek additional reassurances over fears that the United States could abandon the region. This agreement, also known as C-SIPA, offers a model or a new paradigm for cooperation based on mutual expression of commitment that draws on the understanding that the value of U.S. commitment and investment in the region is more than just military. I'm honored to be joined today to talk about this agreement by two of the most esteemed experts on the topic: U.S. Ambassador to Bahrain, Steve Bondi, and Bahraini Ambassador to the United States, Abdullah bin Rashid Al Khalifa. Before I fully introduce the speakers, let me run through a bit of light housekeeping. Following the introductory remarks, we will open up the question and answer session. If you would like to ask questions, you are more than welcome to enter them into the Zoom Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you are watching this on the website or on YouTube, please feel free to email your questions to policyforum@washingtoninstitute.org. And with that, let me introduce our speakers. Unfortunately, my brief overview of their bios does not do their incredible careers in government service justice, but first we will hear from Ambassador Steve Bondi, who has served as the U.S. Ambassador to the Kingdom of Bahrain since December 2021 and is a member of the Senior Foreign Service. He has served in a number of positions in U.S. embassies and missions around the world, to include the United Arab Emirates, Afghanistan, Jordan, Egypt, Turkey, and Iraq, as well as a number of positions here in Washington, D.C. Ambassador Khalifa has served in his role as the Kingdom of Bahrain's ambassador to the United States since April of 2017. He has previously served in multiple positions within the Bahraini government, most notably for 6 years as the governor of Bahrain's Southern Governorate, which is the largest governorate in Bahrain. So first, Ambassador Bondi, I'll turn to you for any opening remarks.
Hey, thanks so much, Liz. And it's truly an honor to be with you all today. And even though it's evening here, let me thank you for joining us so early on a Monday morning. I'm delighted to see my very good friend, Ambassador Sheikh Abdullah bin Rashid Al Khalifa. And Liz, great to see you too. And let me just put in a plug for the piece that Liz wrote for the Washington Institute and issued a few weeks ago on this agreement. It's stellar. If you haven't read it, I actually have a long history with the Washington Institute. I'll just summarize it by saying it's been so long that I can remember when the abbreviation used to be YNEP and not TWI. There are several former colleagues and even a few bosses among the leadership team at the Institute. So very nice to reconnect. As Liz mentioned, I've been in Manama now for 2.5 years. There have been ups and downs, which is normal in any ambassadorial role. But I got to say, there is no better diplomatic assignment that I could have had. The leadership here in Bahrain has a strategic vision. Bahrain is a close and supportive partner. We diplomats have excellent access to decision makers. And best of all, we can have broad discussions where we try to figure out a common way forward. It's frankly just what diplomats want. We have a range of U.S. government priorities here in Bahrain. The strategic relationship, building political and economic ties throughout the region, defending against threats, developing trade and investment links, promoting our values agenda, strengthening people-to-people ties, and securing our borders. And I just want to put our current strategic relationship into context. It was just after World War II when the very first U.S. Navy ship first arrived in Bahrain. This was at a time when the region was beginning to produce and export oil, and it was judged to be a strategic asset that the United States could help in protect and keep the sea lanes open. And from there, we've grown into a situation now where Bahrain is the host of the Fifth Fleet, headed by a three-star admiral. And on any given day, there can be 4, 6, 8,000 U.S. military and DoD civilians in country. And dependents, by the way, and there is a DoD school here that we're very, very proud of. The embassy works very closely with the Bahraini government to ensure the United States military is able to carry out its activities and to project force throughout the region. And of course, this is an often unstable region. The newest development, as Liz referred to, is the signing of the Comprehensive Security Integration and Prosperity Agreement. For short, we'll call it C-SIPA. And that was signed last September 13th in Washington by Crown Prince Prime Minister Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa and Secretary of State Blinken. It comes as a result of a robust negotiation process, which all along was intended to bring our two countries closer together. There are three primary pillars: military defense and security, economic trade and investment, and science, emerging technology, and network security. The agreement is a binding executive agreement. However, it's not a treaty. And there is no mutual security guarantee. However, the key passage is that in the event of external attack or the threat of external attack, the two governments will come together at the highest level to chart a joint way forward. If you want to drill into the details, the text of the agreement is online. And September 13th turned out to be very propitious in terms of the timing. As you all know, just a few weeks later, Hamas launched their terrorist attack on Israel, and that led to the resulting Gaza crisis. Now, this situation actually led our governments to become ever more closer together. We are working together to address the challenges came as a result of the crisis. And I will say, and hopefully Ambassador Sheikh Abdullah doesn't mind, that it was Bahrain's Crown Prince who spoke publicly in his own voice at the Manama Dialogue last November, where he publicly condemned Hamas. As far as I know, he is the only Arab leader to do so in his own words. With C-SIPA, Bahrain felt confident to stand publicly with the United States in several areas. When Yemen's Houthis began attacking commercial vessels in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden, the U.S. military formed a coalition operation to defend and protect vessels, Operation Prosperity Guardian. Bahrain is the only Arab or Muslim country to be a public member of the coalition. Bahrain is present in our operations center, and it contributes to maritime domain awareness and our responses. Bahrain and the United States also have taken steps to protect critical infrastructure in Bahrain as a result of the Houthi threats. I can't go into that, but rest assured, we are working together to protect Bahrain. And what I'm trying to describe for you is that this is C-SIPA in action. It is implemented, and this is to both of our countries' benefit. This creates a new dynamic, provides new energy, and as some of my Bahraini contacts have said, have provided a turbo boost to our bilateral relationship. Our intent is to broaden C-SIPA so that we can have like-minded partners from the region and around the world contributing to a new regional security architecture. We're looking for opportunities to do that right now. And as we look ahead, I think we will see that there are great opportunities in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Bondi. Ambassador Khalifa, I'll now turn to you for opening remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Elizabeth, for convening this very important and timely discussion. I am very honored and pleased to be seated alongside, albeit virtually, my dear friend and colleague, His Excellency Ambassador Steve Bondi, who I've had the pleasure of serving because of the synergistic view of the relationship, and we were able to see many milestones being hit, one of them being obviously the topic of the day, C-SIPA. I think it's very important to realize that what got us to C-SIPA was a very long history of reliability, of dependability, and of enduring partnerships that were built across multiple sectors, whether it's on the defense side or the economic, the trade. But I think it's important to highlight that it all started out in the late 1800s on a people-to-people level when American missionaries first visited Bahrain. And so this deep-rooted relationship has proven the test of time through multiple initiatives that have brought about win-win situations, not only for both countries, but for the region as a whole. And I'm delighted to talk a little bit more about how this came about and what are the intentions behind it. It's fashionable these days whenever a movie or a series is put out to then do a prequel to it. And I think the prequel to C-SIPA was actually a visit by His Royal Highness Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa to Washington, D.C. This was back in 2022, where the initial idea of the need for the creation of a new security architecture for the entire region was first discussed. And through a couple of years of diplomatic efforts, we were able to sign the agreement. And as His Excellency stated, there is lots that's happening. Some of it can be put out in the public, some of it not. But I rest assured that it is a framework for a new blueprint for US-Bahrain relations with an open-ended kind of agreement, especially if we look at Article 8, where it was left open-ended because the idea is for it to move from where it is today to encompassing more in the future.
Thank you both. I'm going to ask the first few questions. And again, just a reminder that if you are on the Zoom Q&A from our virtual audience, you are more than welcome to submit a question into the Zoom function at the bottom of your screen. If you're watching this from the website or from our YouTube, you can also email in a question to policyforum@washingtoninstitute.org. So again, I'll kick off the questions. As you both have alluded to, the US-Bahrain relationship is quite solid. The countries have a very long diplomatic history, and Bahrain hosts the US Naval Central Command as well as the Fifth Fleet. Why was it important for this agreement to be signed now? I think we've alluded to it a bit, but what value does it intrinsically add to the relationship? And what signal does it send to the rest of the countries who are sort of watching this now? So Ambassador Bondi, I'll turn to you first.
Okay, sure. Yeah, listen, I think Ambassador Sheikh Abdullah really summarized it quite well when he said, that we have a long history going back over 130 years. The way I view it is that C-SIPA is just the latest manifestation of the closeness of that relationship. Look, it shows a common purpose, an assessment of the strategic environment, And, frankly, that our destinies are linked, that the closer we work together, the safer we will be. At its core, this agreement reflects a shared approach to a dangerous world. It reinforces some key principles that we have to keep reminding ourselves. The international rules-based order, a rule of law, sovereignty, respect for borders, no interference in domestic affairs, freedom of navigation. Look, these are the things that we take as granted, and yet, as we look around the world today, we see that they are under threat in many ways. So the idea is to bring together like-minded countries, in this case, Bahrain and the United States, who value these principles, who see the benefit that we've had from working together to reinforce these very important elements. And then, and Liz, you alluded to this earlier, economic growth and national security are inextricably linked. And that's why in this particular agreement, we decided to explicitly include elements of economy, technology, as well as security. And the bottom line is, in tumultuous times, you want to stand by people you can rely upon. And that's what this agreement does for us.
So just to continue on some of the points that His Excellency mentioned, I think it's worth noting that 2 years ago, and many of us heard it here in Washington, the question of the US's commitment towards the Middle East. And at that time, we started to see the landscape in the Middle East starting to shift. And so C-SIPA comes at a very timely manner where the US is sending a clear message to the region of how partnerships can yield multiple results across multiple fields. Now, when you look at the history, let's say on the defense side, we started out with a defense cooperation agreement. We have hosted multiple coalitions in Bahrain. We have been part of every US-led operation in the region in our modern history. And so putting together this agreement was a natural. And having a defense working group within C-SIPA was also a natural. And so on the defense front, it makes complete sense that more integration is needed. And because of that need, a higher commitment towards one another is what we required. Now, why did we add the other elements to it? In order for us to ensure that we have a thriving community without avenues of prosperity, it's very difficult to do. And so adding the two other elements adds so much depth to C-SIPA and proves to be a unique model that will hopefully serve as a catalyst for others to look at and hopefully join in the future. When we have like-minded countries that share the same values and share the same ambitions for the region, looking at the evolution of what is happening politically in the region and looking at the opportunities, I think there's a lot that C-SIPA can offer. And within the next couple of years, we will definitely see a lot of interest in the agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. That actually segues into my next question, which is when the agreement was signed, a key element was expansion to other like-minded countries, as you've mentioned. What is your message to others who may be considering joining? And is there a plan that the United States and Bahrain are working on to bring in other countries? I can start off with you.
Well, the best way to do it is to showcase success. And there are a number of pointers that we can look at today. For example, the approval of a $500 million loan by Exim Bank to look at ways in which we can run our oil manufacturing plant more efficiently and reach our environmental goals is one of the ways. Now, as we move forward and we find avenues of success, it is also important not only to look at neighbors, but to go beyond the region and look at every country that has a stake in the region, whether it be linked to supply chain or other areas that make sense for those countries to join. And I think that's the discussion that is currently happening behind closed doors. I don't want to get ahead of it, but rest assured that there is interest. And the best way to garner that support is to showcase success.
Ambassador Bondi, anything to add?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. That building out C-SIPA remains a key objective of ours. We do welcome the like-minded countries from the region and around the world. And look, there already is a network of countries to support the kinds of principles that we talked about a few minutes ago. What C-SIPA is trying to do is to formalize it. I mean, we know who we can work with, we know who we can rely upon, but now there's actually an agreement that governments can sign up for in order to formalize that commitment and that approach. And let me also mention, this does not come out of the blue. There's been a lot of work over the years, mostly led by the U.S. Central Command, in order to bring together kind of, common operating picture among the United States and our GCC partners, and develop integrated responses. Additionally, there have been, on the civilian side of the house, also a lot of work in coordinating our strategic approaches. So this does not replace any of that. In fact, I would say C-SIPA works alongside it. Now, as Ambassador Sheikh Abdullah mentioned, we already had the first session of the Defense Working Group, which is actually mandated in the text of the agreement. What we're doing now is trying to turn our attention to build up the infrastructure related to kind of the economic and commercial parts and the science, technology, and trusted network elements.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to some questions from our virtual audience briefly. Ambassador Bondi, you have actually already alluded to this a bit, but sort of this effort to build an air defense coalition in the region. Do you think that the signing of C-SIPA was necessary to facilitate this multilateral air defense coordination? Is it a step in the process? As you've said, they're sort of complementary to each other. How do you see this being built out over time? And Ambassador Bondi, I'll turn to you first. I think you're muted.
Pop up on, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. Technical issues. Listen, as you mentioned, these are complementary. They're happening in parallel tracks. I wouldn't say that C-SIPA is the critical element to promoting, for example, integrated air and missile defense. That effort was already underway. However, as we make progress in that regard, C-SIPA then presents kind of a formal option for working together hand in glove with the United States and with Bahrain. And we certainly are seeing the benefits of that. Again, every day, our militaries are coordinating to ensure that all of our interests are protected. And so as sort of the United States' cooperation, collaboration with the region grows, my view is that it will lead C-SIPA to look even more attractive.
Absolutely. Just building on His Excellency Ambassador Bondi's remarks, I think it was Plato that says necessity is the mother of invention. And at a time where the region felt like there was a need to build an air defense capability, there was the initiation of that initiative, but we wouldn't have gotten there without all the work that was done ahead of time. And I think the key word today that not only the US is looking for, but also partners in the region is integration. Whether it's integration on the defense front or the cyber or the emerging threats that deem to be problematic as we move forward in progressing our societies. And so C-SIPA provides a platform for higher integration. On the defense side, we can talk about joint exercises that have been going on for multiple years. But what is the technology that's being used? What are the frameworks that are put in place? And infrastructure, what is the technology that's being used? And if a government was to move forward with a certain technology, but then in a number of years realize that this is probably not the best outcome, that's going to cost a lot to take that out, replace it. It's time, it's money, it's effort. And so what C-SIPA does is, I think it lines everybody up towards a better outcome. And hopefully through the continued work on those multiple disciplines, we'll be able to point to tangible results in the years to come. You did mention a very important question, which is what is next? What are we doing next year? And I think the focus not only on the defense front, but the opportunities and the economic sphere and the technological and R&D are going to be the most that we will focus on, bringing about opportunities in introducing new industries to the region, bringing new technology to the region. And that's where the value lies.
Absolutely. And again, that segues very well into the next question here. So it sounds like a majority of the focus over the next year will be on these economic and technology sectors. Are there any specific achievements that from this agreement that you both want to highlight that have occurred over the last year since its signing, given that we were talking earlier about how what will be the most marketable part of this agreement will be the successes that come from it? So Ambassador Khalif, I can turn to you.
There's a lot of talk today about guaranteeing supply chain resiliency. There's a lot of talk about protecting the information highway. There's a lot of talk about deterring emerging threats. And so all of these opportunities are opportunities that can fit right into this agreement. And usually these discussions take a little bit of time, but rest assured that the opportunities that we see today are very different than those that we saw a number of years ago. But again, I go back to the idea of what brought us here. So having a free trade agreement with the US, dedicating a US trade zone in Bahrain, all of these different elements make it easier for us to achieve our goals in the coming years within the framework of C-SIPA.
Ambassador Badu, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, listen, we're celebrating the first year anniversary of the signing of the agreement. So, let's be realistic. We're not going to have a long list of items that we've already accomplished. And as you know, the region has been focusing on other more urgent crises, where both the United States government and the Bahraini government have had to devote a lot of brainpower, energy, creativity towards, if not resolving, then at least calming. So there's competition within our two governments on where the attention is paid. However, we see the result of a senior level visitor coming and visiting a capital. So in the month of July, Bahrain's national security advisor, Sheikh Nasser bin Hamad Al Khalifa, came to Washington. He also went out to Aspen. And as a result of his visit, there are some very practical deliverables that came out of the Defense Working Group that we're implementing right away, right now. So I think that as we look ahead into the coming period for the commercial area and the science and tech area, we ought to look also to kind of shine a spotlight on those areas, put into place the infrastructure that then allows us to move ahead with joint projects. And I want to refer back to something that Sheikh Abdullah mentioned a few minutes ago, and that is our intent is not to push people to join this agreement, but rather let there create a magnetic pull as countries on their own see the benefits of joining the agreement, then they gravitate towards it. That's our objective here.
Thank you. I know we've talked about the security portion of this agreement a multitude of times. One question from the virtual audience is what the potential impact of a Saudi Arabia and U.S. defense treaty could have on C-SIPA, with the acknowledgement that you are both ambassadors to different countries and are not going to talk about some of the larger policy. If you're able to answer some parts of that question.
I'm happy to go first. I think any bolstering of U.S. Neighboring countries' relationship is one that we value. It's in line with what we're trying to do. It is something that will create added layers of stability and open up new opportunities. And so the idea for this bilateral agreement is for it to grow as time goes by. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. There's always ways in which we can find ways to bring those two initiatives closer together. And ultimately, what we would like to see is, as countries join C-SIPA, for it to move from an agreement to a treaty. It's been a while since Congress has passed a treaty, and so let's make it worthwhile as we present something to members of Congress.
Ambassador Bondi?
Yeah, so I would say that everything that I know about Saudi-Israel normalization and the United States' role in it, I've read in the newspapers. So you know what I know. But let me just say that I sincerely hope that one day we are considering the impact of such an agreement on C-SIPA. I think that's a thought process we'd all love to be able to go through. It's going to be hard to predict, what those two countries are going to do amongst themselves. I know the United States, of course, very committed to doing what it can to achieve progress, not just with Saudi Arabia and Israel, but frankly, across the board, regional integration, political, military, security, economic, is absolutely a top priority of ours. But we can't get ahead of events, and we'll see what the impact might be. But I certainly believe that C-SIPA has aspects that should be useful to any country considering getting into a closer relationship with the United States and with other like-minded countries.
Thank you. Not to mention that the economic and technology sector, integration is incredibly important and just beyond the defense scope. I want to move now to Iran. I think both Washington and Manama remain aligned in the view that Iran is the most significant destabilizing factor in the region, one of the most, if not the most. Moreover, Iran often thrives when others in the region are divided. How do you think Tehran viewed the signing of this agreement, and do you expect Iran to challenge it in the future? Ambassador Khalifa, why don't I start with you?
Well, facts are facts. And right after the signing of the agreement, unfortunately, we lost a number of our military personnel by an attack by the Houthis. Is that a message that was being sent to Bahrain? Not quite sure. But there's a price to pay, and the price is high when it comes to creating peace in the region, and we understand that. But we also need to understand that in order for us to come up with a way in which we can protect ourselves, we can only do it through partnerships like these. And that's why we are fully dedicated to C-SIPA. As a matter of fact, to show our commitment, and this was mentioned in the opening remarks by His Excellency Ambassador, Bahrain joined Operation Prosperity Guardian because of that commitment, because it's a continuation to what we have been doing for many years, but it's also to show our commitment towards this agreement. And so as we move forward, we need to think of ways in which we can build up our capabilities to protect ourselves from conventional and unconventional methods of warfare. But at the same time, we also need to look at this diplomatically and find ways in which we can lower the temperature. If you would ask us today in the region, any leader in the region, what keeps you up at night? It's the uncertainty of what might happen because of a situation that can't be controlled. And that's why leaders in the region have opted for de-escalation. Following that attack, there was no escalatory steps taken by Bahrain, because we recognize that any steps in that direction might lead to a bigger conflict. And so as the landscape shifts in the region, we're looking at ways in which we can deal with those situations without having flare-ups that will create controversial situations that need to be dealt with in the future.
Ambassador Bondi, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that the United States and Bahrain have a shared threat assessment, not only of the region, but frankly, globally. We have a common vision on how to address those threats, and now we are formally working together in that way. But I really want to be clear here. C-SIPA was formed in order to stand publicly for our shared principles. It is a vision of achieving progress. C-SIPA is not targeted against any particular country, but rather the types of threats that we see that will disrupt security, stability, prosperity, peace. The principles that are embedded in C-SIPA should be universal, but they're not, unfortunately. And so that's why I believe, and our intent is for those countries that are drawn to the principles, the international rules-based order, we think that they might be interested in joining up with C-SIPA, and we welcome that development.
So again, staying on this topic, we saw on April 13th, I think an attack by Iran, where a coalition of countries came together to help defend the airspace, let's say. We won't say a specific country, but the airspace. How does the C-SIPA play into that? Is that part of the greater defense and security integration? And while it may not have been against one country specifically, is the understanding that, again, that is the value here?
Well, Liz, I think you've heard it from many voices in the region that regardless of where the missiles were pointed at, the idea is to protect airspace in general. And this goes back to my point of de-escalation. The situation today has gotten to a point where the Middle East cannot afford to see another flare-up. And the longer the situation in Gaza continues, the more sensitive the region is to any other issue. So our eyes are focused on Gaza, but we didn't lose track of what's happening in the entire region as well. And so I think we'll continue to ensure that our airspace is protected, and through further integration, we will be able to achieve that. It's going to take a very long period of time for multiple countries in the region to realize that these are their requirements, and in order to get there, they can't do it alone. And so as we move forward, we will continue to build out those coalitions. I wouldn't be surprised to see other operations happening in the region to ensure that there is calm, to ensure that there is a de-escalatory force that ensures that the region is not going through a cycle of violence in other parts of it. So airspace is important, but maritime is also as important. It has an effect on the region. It has an effect beyond the region. Our eyes are also on these other elements to ensure that our region is safe and secure.
Yeah, so from my point of view, look, it's important to know what's in C-SIPA. It's also important to know what's not in C-SIPA. So just to reiterate something I mentioned at the top, C-SIPA brings the United States and Bahrain and any future partners together in the event of external attack or the threat of external attack on the parties. So what you saw happen in mid-April, you wouldn't want to, I mean, you couldn't define it in any way an attack on the United States or an attack on Bahrain, thank goodness. But let's also take the larger point of view is that there's going to be spillover effects. So as we become more and more interoperable, as our systems are tied more closely together, when there's an unexpected contingency that develops, even if it doesn't necessarily meet the strict definition of C-SIPA, there's going to be benefits. But again, I referred earlier to the really amazing work that CENTCOM has been doing to bring the United States and the GCC partners closer together. And maybe what we saw in April was more an outcome of those close relationships than specifically C-SIPA.
Thank you. And when the agreement was first signed, I think there was a lot of skepticism on, at least in the public domain, about whether or not the United States could uphold some of these commitments, and whether or not it could be trusted after perceptions that it had, quote unquote, abandoned the region. What is your response to that skepticism? Ambassador Khalifa, I'll start with you.
Like I said in the beginning, I think this is a prime example as to the US's continued commitment towards the region. We have seen multiple visits by high-ranking officials. We have seen the involvement of Bahrain in the decision-making process that has an effect on the entire region. And so I think it was wise to sign this agreement at the time where there were voices. But then again, there's one thing that we need to be cognizant of, which is the fact that misinformation and disinformation has really become weaponized these days. And in order for us to protect ourselves, we need to be one step ahead. We need to be public in some of the prospects that are being discussed, and they need to come to fruition. And so I think C-SIPA kind of, when it was signed and the work that happened right after, some of the announcements that were made along the way, sent a clear and undeniable message of US solidarity with Bahrain, and that this can be a model for other relationships in the entire region.
Yeah, I would echo that by all means. And look, we call it the abandonment narrative. I think it's better to call it the abandonment conspiracy theory. Look, there are many, many people and capabilities in the region, American service members, American technology. And if what you're doing is comparing the number of people in uniform in the Gulf region today versus 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, that's not an accurate measure of capabilities, okay, with technology and with autonomous systems, and of course, the introduction of AI. The capabilities are much better than they ever were before. And look, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of things that we can't talk about in the public domain, but I can assure you that capabilities are moving in and out in response to the threat picture. But also, there's a lot of things we can talk about. I mean, look, I've been here 2.5 years. Until a few months ago, there had not been a United States aircraft carrier or carrier strike group in the CENTCOM AOR for years. And now we have had 2, and there's a third one on its way. CENTCOM announced a submarine also patrolling around the region. This all in the public domain. Fleets of aircraft coming in and out. So, I mean, look, it's a dynamic world. There's threats coming in from many vectors. And even as well endowed as the United States government, United States military are, there's always a competition for resources. But definitely, we have demonstrated our ability to flex, to move people, systems, equipment, capabilities in and out as they were required.
I want to pick up on a thread that you just mentioned on the economic and technology piece of this. Bahrain has some very unique data privacy laws that are, I think, incredibly attractive for technology companies to invest in the country. And given that that's one of the sectors that C-SIPA is focused on, I'm wondering if you both can talk a little bit more about that and what sort of that forward trajectory looks like for you. So Ambassador Bondi, I'll turn to you first.
Well, sure. I'm going to steal some of Ambassador Sheikh Abdullah's thunder here, because really all credit goes to the Bahraini government. Bahrain has a very open and a very welcoming investment environment. even to the point where policymakers, decision makers will look a potential investor in the eye and say, how do we solve your problem? How do we get to yes? And in the case, Liz, that you're referring to, a potential investor at that time said that they were very interested in a data proprietary law, meaning that if they were to establish a cloud server farm in Bahrain, what rights would the Bahraini government have to sort of take a look at that data versus the country in which that data was created? And in this case, Bahrain did pass a law saying that the ownership of that data resides in the country where it was created, not where it's being saved. And that then led that particular company, which is Amazon Web Services, to create a significant investment in the country. And that's just one example. There is the United States trade zone, where Bahrain is seeking to attract American investors. It's in about as good real estate as you can have in the commercial port. Very easy for logistics, light manufacturing, and that sort of thing. And the idea is, as we discovered during the COVID era, supply chains can weaken and degrade very, very quickly. So if American companies are going to be investing and producing outside of the United States, why not do it in a country that we have a formal strategic security agreement with? So Secretary of the Treasury Yellen has referred to something as friend shoring. In other words, you're going to offshore. Why not do it in a friendly nation? And I think Bahrain at this time is trying to present itself as that friendly nation.
So, Liz, what we're trying to do here is to marry the two. There are certain initiatives that we saw coming out of U.S. government where friendshoring has been the key focus. And there are a number of countries within certain sectors, ICT included, that have benefited from it. And we ask the question, why not Bahrain? And so in our discussions today, we're looking to create new industries, downstream industries in Bahrain that can facilitate the needs of regional partners, but primarily the US. Think of companies, instead of shipping their product all the way to the Middle East, operate out of a base in Bahrain in this very important sector. And as the region starts to digitize its services, governments will be looking for more and more housing of data, for more and more technological advancements that can help them get to their goals. And we have positioned ourselves to be the number one go-to when it comes to US investments in the region. And so the groundwork has already been laid for investments coming from the US in terms of all these different IP laws that have been passed. There is a history behind some of the products that were tested. And so it presents itself as a very unique case that will hopefully bring about success to all those that will choose to invest.
Thank you. And Ambassador Khalifa, I do want to ask you one additional question, and then I want to offer you both the time to give some closing remarks if you feel so inclined. Over the last several months, Bahrain has pardoned, I think, over 2,000 prisoners, a fair number of them political prisoners. Obviously, this is a pretty significant development. Even though value sharing, human rights has always been a part of the U.S.-Bahrain relationship and dialogues that we've had over the years. What can you share with us about these recent developments?
Look, this is the 25th anniversary since His Majesty the King has ascended the throne. And so it's a very special year for Bahrain. What is important to note that the royal pardons aren't really a new kind of initiative by His Majesty, but this is probably one of the biggest royal pardons that we have seen in a number of years. As a matter of fact, last week we had an additional, this is a third pardon of over 450 individuals. All were sentenced to crimes that they have committed, but then this is a reaffirmation that the need for rehabilitation is one that His Majesty regards highly, and the government of Bahrain. At the same time, there are multiple initiatives that set our judicial record apart in the region, whether it's we're the first to introduce alternative sentencing and the first to introduce the concept of open prisons, and we will continue down that road. But we saw that this is an opportune moment for reintegration and rehabilitation. Human rights is obviously one of the most important backbones within our foreign policy, but also domestic policy. And so it shouldn't come as a surprise. We're hopeful to see those individuals become productive individuals in our society. As a matter of fact, there was a directive to government to enlist all of those that were included in the pardons in the unemployment pension while finding jobs for them. And so it is an ongoing discussion that we have, and it is an ongoing process in which we will continue to find ways to move forward.
Thank you, Ambassador Khalifa, for that comprehensive answer. I do think that we are just about out of time, so I want to take a couple of minutes to ensure that you both have some time for closing remarks. Ambassador Bondi, why don't I turn to you first?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, very useful session. Really grateful for the Washington Institute organizing it, and anyone there in person and people online. Thank you for tuning in. What I want to leave you with is, we talked.
Can everyone still hear me? Okay, unfortunately, I think we lost Ambassador Bondi, or he froze. But Ambassador Khalifa, why don't I turn to you?
Absolutely. I hope we can get
so
Ambassador Bondi in the time being, but thank you very much for this session. I think it's important to highlight C-SIPA. This is a very unique week for Bahrain. Within this week, we celebrate 1-year anniversary of C-SIPA, 4-year anniversary of the Abraham Accords, and 20 years since we signed the free trade agreement. And so we see how US-led initiatives have really helped position Bahrain in a manner that has really set us apart. We value the relationship, we value the partnership, and we hope that the US sees it the way we do. We know that the US sees it the way we do. And we look forward to forging an even stronger relationship in the years to come.
Ambassador Bondi, I think we have you back on Zoom, so we'll turn it back to you for closing remarks.
Great, thanks. Yeah, momentary interruption there. Listen, I just wanted to thank you, Liz, the Washington Institute, of course, my partner, Sheikh Abdullah, for participating in this forum. Thank you for opening up your Monday morning with us. Really, my objective walking into this was to spread awareness as to what is this agreement and how do we benefit. And we do have a continuing objective of building it out. We think it's a pretty darn good agreement as it's written, but if there are other nations that are interested in, let's say, emphasizing certain areas and, suggesting changes to the text, I think both of our governments are open to that. We definitely are keeping an eye on the longer term, and the more that we can formalize relationships between countries that have the same values in the international environment, we're all going to be better off. So hoping to see some action in that regard in the coming period.
Well, thank you both again for being here today and for the robust discussion. We're all out of time, but I look forward to seeing where things progress over the next